On the night of July 16, 1918, a family was woken up in the middle of the night. They were told to dress quickly. They were told to go down to the basement. They were told it was for their safety. There were dangerous people outside. The guards said the basement was safer. The family believed them. There were 11 people who walked down those basement stairs that night, a husband and wife, their 5 children, their family doctor, and 3 servants who had refused to abandon the family even in their darkest hours. None of them would ever walk back up. The family name was Romanov. They had ruled Russia for over 300 years. They had commanded the largest country on earth. They had lived in palaces filled with gold and jewels beyond imagination. And on that night, in a plain basement room in a city called Yekaterinburg, it all ended. This is their story. The Romanov dynasty had ruled Russia since 1613, that is over 300 years of one family sitting on the throne of one of the largest empires in human history. At its peak, the Russian Empire stretched across 11 time zones, from Eastern Europe all the way to the Pacific Ocean. It covered 1/6 of all the land on earth. It was the largest country that had ever existed. The Romanovs lived in a level of luxury that is almost impossible to imagine today. Their main home was a winter palace in St. Petersburg, a building with over 1,500 rooms decorated with gold, crystal chandeliers, priceless artwork, and marble floors. They had multiple other palaces across Russia, each one more spectacular than the last. Tsar Nicholas II became the ruler of all this in 1894 when his father Alexander III died suddenly of kidney disease. Nicholas was just 26 years old. He was not ready. By all accounts, Nicholas was gentle, loving man, devoted to his family, kind to those around him, deeply religious, but gentle and kind are not always the qualities needed to rule the largest empire on earth. At one of the most turbulent moments in history, Nicholas himself reportedly said after his father's death, "I am not ready to be Tsar. I never wanted to be Tsar." Those words would turn out to be one of the most honest things a ruler ever said about himself. Nicholas married a German princess named Alexandra in 1894. By most accounts, it was a genuine love match, unusually so for royal marriages of that era, which were usually political arrangements. Nicholas and Alexandra were devoted to each other completely, writing thousands of tender letters throughout their lives together. They had 5 children, 4 daughters, and 1 son. The daughters were named Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia. The son, the youngest child, was named Alexei. Alexei was heir to the entire Russian throne, and Alexei was very seriously ill. He had a condition called hemophilia, a disease where the blood does not clot properly. This means that even a small cut, a minor bruise, or a bump on the knee could cause bleeding that would not stop. For Alexei, playing outside like a normal child was genuinely dangerous. A simple fall could be life-threatening. Alexandra was consumed by fear for her son. She loved all her children deeply, but Alexei's illness was a constant shadow over her life. She tried everything: doctors, prayers, and eventually a man who would prove to be one of the most controversial figures in Russian history. His name was Rasputin. He was a strange, mysterious peasant from Siberia who claimed to have healing powers. Alexandra believed he could help Alexei, and there was some evidence that his presence did calm the boy during episodes of pain, though doctors could never explain how. Rasputin's influence over Alexandra grew enormously, which caused scandal throughout the Russian court. The aristocracy despised him. Foreign governments were alarmed by him. His presence in the royal family damaged the reputation of the Tsar enormously in the eyes of Russian public. But Alexandra did not care about reputation, she cared about her son staying alive. While the royal family dealt with their private crises, Russia itself was heading toward an explosion. While the Romanovs lived in extraordinary luxury, the vast majority of Russian people lived in desperate poverty. Russia in the early 1900s was deeply divided. A tiny number of aristocrats and wealthy landowners controlled almost everything. Ordinary workers, farmers, and peasants had almost nothing. In 1905, these tensions boiled over into serious rebellion. Hundreds of thousands of workers went on strike. Ordinary people marched to the Tsar's palace in St. Petersburg to deliver a petition asking for basic rights and better conditions. It was a peaceful march, but the Tsar's soldiers opened fire on the crowd. Hundreds of unarmed civilians were killed in what became known as Bloody Sunday. The massacre shocked Russia and the world. In one terrible afternoon, the image of the Tsar as a caring father figure to his people was shattered. Nicholas introduced some limited reforms, but not enough. Too little, too late. The anger in Russia never truly went away after that day. It simply went underground and kept growing. Then came the disaster that pushed everything past the breaking point. World War I. In 1914, Russia entered the war. The Russian army suffered catastrophic losses, millions of soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. Supplies ran out. Soldiers sometimes went to the front without proper boots, without enough food, without enough weapons. Russia was completely unprepared for the scale of the conflict. The Russian people were starving, grieving, and furious, and they blamed the Tsar. Nicholas made one final fatal decision. He personally took command of the Russian army, traveling to the front lines to lead it himself. This meant that every military defeat, and there were many, was now personally associated with his name. Back in St. Petersburg, Alexandra was left in charge of the government, and Rasputin, who had enormous influence over her, was effectively influencing major government decisions. Key ministers were appointed and dismissed based on Rasputin's advice. The court was in chaos. The aristocracy was outraged. The Russian Empire was crumbling from the inside. In February 1917, the revolution finally came. It started with bread riots, women standing in long lines in the freezing cold of St. Petersburg, waiting for bread that never arrived, finally broke. They went into the streets, workers joined them, then soldiers, who had been ordered to suppress the crowds, refused. Instead, they put down their weapons and joined the protesters. Within days, the entire city was in revolt. The government lost control completely. Nicholas was hundreds of miles away at the military front. His generals sent him a message telling him the truth. The army would not fight for him. The government had collapsed. There was no way back. On March 2, 1917, Tsar Nicholas II signed a piece of paper and ended over 300 years of Romanov rule. He abdicated. He gave up the throne. He did it simply, quietly, in a railway carriage. He reportedly wrote in his diary that night about the weather and how he had drunk tea. The man who had ruled 1/6 of the earth's surface stepped down and went back to his family. A new temporary government took over in Russia. Nicholas and his family were placed under house arrest in their palace. They were comfortable at first, still living relatively normally with their servants and belongings around them. But Russia was not finished changing, and the next change would be even more violent than the last. The temporary government that replaced the Tsar did not last long. In October 1917, a second revolution happened, this one led by a radical communist group called the Bolsheviks, headed by a man named Vladimir Lenin. The Bolsheviks believed in a completely different kind of society, one where workers controlled everything, where the old aristocracy and royal families had no place, and where the wealth of the rich would be taken and redistributed. They seized power quickly and began transforming Russia into what would eventually become the Soviet Union. For the Romanov family, the Bolsheviks coming to power was a very serious danger. The Bolsheviks did not see Nicholas as a sad, failed ruler who deserved sympathy. They saw him as a symbol, a dangerous symbol of the old world they were trying to destroy. As long as Nicholas was alive, he could become a rallying point for forces trying to reserve the revolution and restore the old order. The family was moved further and further away from major cities, first to western Siberia, then to the remote city of Yekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains, deep in the heart of Russia. Their living conditions became worse with each move. Fewer servants, smaller rooms, less food, more gods, less freedom. The children tried to keep their spirits up. They put on small plays, they gardened, they studied, they wrote in their diaries. Anastasia, the youngest daughter, wrote letters that were funny and irrelevant even in captivity. She was known for making everyone laugh even in the hardest times. But in the summer of 1918, the situation changed rapidly. A civil war was raging across Russia. Forces loyal to the old regime, called the White Army, were fighting the Bolsheviks, and the White Army was getting closer to the Yekaterinburg. The Bolsheviks leaders in Moscow made a decision. The house where the Romanovs were being held was called the Ipatiev House. The guards there received orders from Moscow on the night of July 16, 1918. Around midnight, the family was woken up. The guard told them to get dressed. He said there was unrest in the city. He said the basement was safer. He asked them to wait there while transport was arranged. Nicholas carried his son Alexei, who was too weak to walk well, down the stairs himself. Alexandra asked for chairs because she had back pain and could not stand for long. Two chairs were brought. She sat in one, Alexei sat in the other. The family arranged themselves in the room. Nicola stood. The four daughters stood behind their parents. The doctor and three servants stood to the side. They waited. Then the guards came back into the room. There were 11 of them, one for each person in the basement. Their leader, a man named Yakov Yurovsky, read out a short statement. He said, "The Bolshevik leadership has decided the family must be executed." Nicholas turned and said, "What?" Those were his last words. The shooting started. The chaos that followed was terrible and prolonged. The daughters had sewn jewels, diamonds, and other precious stones into the lining of their clothing to hide them from the gods. These jewels acted accidentally as a kind of crude protection against the bullets, causing the first shot to deflect. The executioners panicked. It took far longer than planned. When it was finally over, all 11 people in that basement were dead. It was approximately 2 in the morning on July 17, 1918. The last ruling family of Russia was gone. The Bolshevik leadership wanted all evidence of what had happened to disappear completely. If the bodies were found, they feared it could inspire the White Army or spark sympathy for the Romanovs. The bodies were taken by truck deep into the forest outside Yekaterinburg. The plan was to destroy them completely using acid and fire, making them completely unidentifiable. But the plan ran into problems almost immediately. They did not have enough acid. The fire was not hot enough. In a panic, the bodies were buried hastily in two separate locations in the forest. The main group, Nicholas, Alexandra, three of the daughters, the doctor, and the servants, were buried together in one pit. Alexei and one of the sisters, most likely Maria or Anastasia, were buried separately. In a smaller pit some distance away, the location was kept a closely guarded secret. For decades, the Soviet government denied knowing what had happened to the family. Officially, for many years, they admitted only that Nicholas had been shot, claiming the rest of the family had been moved somewhere safe. It was a lie, and it was a lie that would hold for over 70 years. In 1979, a Soviet geologist and amateur historian named Alexander Avdonin quietly discovered the main burial pit. He told almost no one in the Soviet Union of that era, revealing such a finding could be extremely dangerous. He kept the secret for another 10 years. It was only in 1991, after the Soviet Union began to collapse, that the grave was officially opened and the remains were brought out into the light. When the main grave was opened in 1991, the remains of 9 people were found, but the Romanov family had 11 people in that basement that night. 2 bodies were missing. Scientists confirmed that Nicholas, Alexandra, and 3 of the daughters were in the grave, but one daughter and young Alexei were not there. And this is where the mystery that had already fascinated the world for decades became even bigger, because for over 70 years there had been a persistent, burning question: did Anastasia survive? Almost from the moment that killings became known, rumors spread that one or more of the Romanov children had escaped. Over the decades, dozens of people, men and women, came forward claiming to be surviving Romanovs. The most famous of all was a woman known as Anna Anderson. Anna Anderson appeared in Berlin in the 1920s, claiming to be Grand Duchess Anastasia. She was intelligent, spoke several languages, and knew details about the Romanov family that seemed impossible for an outsider to know. She convinced some surviving Romanov relatives that she was genuine. Others were certain she was not. The debate over whether Anna Anderson was really Anastasia became one of the most famous identity mysteries of the entire 20th century. Books were written about her, films were made, the question gripped the public for decades. In 1994, DNA testing finally gave the answer. Anna Anderson was not Anastasia. She was a Polish factory worker named Franziska Shanskowska. The mystery was solved, at least that part of it, but the actual bodies of Anastasia and Alexei were still missing. In 2007, Russian archaeologists searching near the original burial site made a new discovery. A second, smaller grave was found, charred bone fragments buried separately in the forests. DNA testing confirmed what had been suspected. The remains belonged to a teenage boy, Alexei, and a young woman, Anastasia. After 89 years, all 11 people from the basement had finally been accounted for. In 2008, Russian scientists announced the DNA results officially. The complete story of what had happened that night in July 1918 was now confirmed beyond doubt. The Russian Orthodox Church gave the Romanovs a full royal burial. Nicholas and Alexandra and their children were declared saints by the church. Hundreds of thousands of Russians came to pay their respects. But even today, not all questions have been answered. Some members of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia refuse to fully accept the DNA results, saying the testing was not completely conclusive. Debates among historians continue about exactly what orders were given, who made the final decision to kill the entire family, including the children, and whether it truly came directly from Lenin himself. The full truth of that night, every decision, every order, every detail is still not completely documented. Today, on the exact spot where the Ipativ house once stood, where that basement was, where 11 people spent their last night, there is a beautiful Russian Orthodox church. It is called the Church on the Blood. Thousands of people visit it every year. The Romanov story is not just a story about one royal family, it is a story about what happens when a society reaches its breaking point, about the enormous gap between the lives of rulers and the lives of ordinary people, about what extreme ideologies are capable of doing when they seize power. It is also a story about five young people: Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei, who had nothing to do with the politics that destroyed their family, who spent their final months in captivity trying to stay positive, writing in diaries, making each other laugh, learning language, and hoping that somehow things would get better. They were not symbols of an old regime, they were children, and their story, buried in that forest for 89 years, deserved to be found. Now it has been. If the Romanov story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now, because every single day, past portraits bring you true stories like this one, stories of real people, real power, and the moments that changed history forever. Drop a comment below and tell me what shocked you most about the Romanovs. Was it the basement, the hidden graves, or something else? And let me know which historical story you want past portraits to cover next. I'll see you tomorrow.